Iranians prepare for the polls. Hardliners are likely to sweep to power after 90% of reformist candidates are barred from running. Will it affect voter turnout? I'm Imran Garda, and today's newsmaker is Iran's parliamentary elections. Iran's parliamentary elections are set to take place this Friday, but has already seen a bold sweep of disqualification from the country's rulers. The Guardian Council, headed by Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has disqualified more than 7,000 candidates. The move threatens to bring turnout to a record low and tighten the so-called hardliners' grip on power. Confrontation with the United States, Iran's downing of a Ukrainian airliner with its own citizens on board, and the bloody crackdown on November protests have battered many Iranians' confidence in their leaders. And with the banning of 90% of so-called reformist candidates, there might be little alternative offered to voters. So, if the vote leaves conservatives firmly in control of parliament, will it be a fair victory? Francis Collins has more.
It's an election with few choices, and one that comes at a turbulent time. Against the backdrop of some serious issues: sanctions, economic hardship, and confrontation with the United States. It was only a few months ago that hundreds were killed in riots caused by increases in the fuel price. Add to this the shooting down of a Ukrainian passenger jet last month, and confidence in the Iranian leaders, including President Hassan Rouhani, is very low. It may mean a small turnout, especially in Tehran, where some people aren't bothering to vote.
I don't think so, because according to what I'm seeing, whoever I vote for, no matter how truthful they are, I just can't trust them.
The economic situation is extremely bad. Our expenses are high, inflation is high, so the priority should be economic issues.
There's also a lack of trust in the system. Many candidates, primarily moderates and reformists, have been barred from standing by the Guardian Council, a 12-member watchdog tasked with approving candidates. It's largely appointed by Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. At least 7,000 applicants, including dozens of current members of parliament, have been told they can't run, for various reasons, such as lack of religious faith, alleged corruption, or even poor health. The council says the rejections are not politically motivated, but it does mean that workers are choosing between hardliners and low-key conservatives, loyal to Ayatollah Khamenei. Iran's leaders would like to see crowded polling stations, signaling to the outside world, primarily the United States, that Iran is unbowed. Khamenei has even issued a call to vote, saying taking part in elections nullifies many of the vicious plots of the United States and the Zionist regime against Iran. The fear could well be a landslide win for the conservatives, but a success soured by mass abstentions. Francis Collins, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now in Tehran is Setareh Sadeqi, who's a PhD student in American Studies at the University of Tehran. In the Bahraini capital, Manama, we have Saleh. He's a lecturer in Middle East politics at Lancaster University. And Patrick Clawson joins us from Washington, D.C. He's the Director of Research at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Good to have you all on the program. Let's go, first of all, to Tehran. Setareh Sadeqi, good to have you back on the program. Will this be competitive elections, or is it impossible when you look at all the disqualifications of people who might disagree with the way things are going and are calling for reform?
Well, from what's happening and what has happened recently among the rivals, the election rivals and the candidates, I can say that at least it's not going to be as competitive as previously seen, or this is the vibes that I get from the people around me in different cities. But we have to also bear in mind that a lot of things that we are hearing about the election comes from the major cities and not smaller cities, where the election vibes and the spirit to take part in the election is much stronger than the few major cities.
Patrick Clawson, is this an election that you would watch and respect and try to draw meaning out of? And no matter which way it goes, would you be able to derive policy from it? Or when you look at it, do you feel that it's a futile waste of time?
Well, the Majlis has become a relatively unimportant institution in Iranian politics. Whereas 20 or 30 years ago, the Majlis was a major decision maker and would change policies proposed by the government. And the Majlis in recent years has become largely a rubber stamp and not at all important. And so therefore, even if this were a competitive election, it wouldn't matter very much. And then, of course, the Council of Guardians has made it completely uncompetitive. And then just add to the mix the announcement that, or the attribution of 2 deaths in Qom to the coronavirus has thrown many people into a panic. And I suspect there are lots of people who are going to want to stay away from the polls tomorrow.
Alam Saleh, okay. So when we look at it from the perspective of the rulers, are they doing it because they're worried? Are they disqualifying the so-called moderates or reformists because they're worried about what might happen if those people are elected?
I think Tehran has just experienced a very, very difficult time. I mean, since November, popular protest in November up until the killing of Qasem Soleimani, and then the shutting down the Ukrainian passenger jet. And I believe that tomorrow's election is not only a parliamentary election, is actually the whole entire political system legitimacy is at task, and any low turnout which would undermine the state's legitimacy it indicates that the state really needs to reconsider its approach towards its internal security challenges and also external security challenges. Everyone was hoping that after such a difficult time, the states would somehow give the chance to people to come and to voice their views and in this election come out and vote for people from a very diverse political background and orientation. But what we see that the hardliners are desperate to face the future challenges, such as the external threats, the United States actually threats in the region, as well as probably the post-Khamenei era in Iran.
Alam, are you expecting a low turnout?
A very low. Any low turnout would definitely lead to the victory of the hardliners. Any very low turnout would definitely undermine the state legitimacy once again.
Setareh Sadeqi, tell me how much the government is saying to the people with regards trying to tell them to go out and actually vote. Are they pushing people to get engaged because there is a low turnout expected?
Well, I think a low turnout is expected in the major cities because of how the government has acted in terms of economic issues and in terms of security issues with regard to the November protests and how the government reacted to it. But I think that's, as I said, mostly in the 3-4 major cities of Iran. And it's very difficult to predict how people are going to react and to see if they're not going to come to the ballot boxes and cast their votes. Because on the one hand, it's true that many of the candidates have been disqualified, especially from the Reformists, but the Reformist party also declared a list, and they announced a list, and the well-known leader of the Reformist Party, Mohammad Khatami, also encouraged people to take part in the election. So we see from both sides that they are inviting people to take part in the election. And if there is a low turnout, which is expected to happen, it's only a reflection of people's grievances towards their government and the policies that the parliament has passed or supported. And also, we have to bear in mind that there were misbehaviors, political misbehavior ahead of the election, and candidates attacking each other, which was part of it could be interpreted as the political rivalry in the liveliness of the elections, but also it disappointed people because it seemed that they are tackling the issues as a political football rather than really caring for what people are going through.
Right, so we know Khatami has told people to vote. We've also got former ministers such as Mustafa Tajzadeh and others calling for a boycott. Going to be interesting to see whether that resonates. Patrick Clawson, to the issue of low turnout. If there is low turnout, say sub 50%, say it's 40% or so, would you agree with Setareh and say that it just means that people have grievances and people have a lack of trust when it comes to this government? Or would you go a step further and say that the legitimacy of the entire system is in question?
Well, we can expect that the government will announce that turnout is higher than 50% because the government has said that it'll be important to have turnout higher than 50%. And we have seen in several past elections, such as the mayoral elections, grossly inflated reports of the turnout. But the reason for a low turnout is, as Setareh said, that people have grievances, but in addition that people are not convinced that any of the candidates represent realistic options for bringing about any change. And so whereas once upon a time there was a real sense that if you voted for one candidate versus another candidate, that there would be a difference in government policies, we don't see that now. And what we see is that when protesters come out in the street for the most ordinary labor protest, that chants quickly turn into chants against the supreme leader and against the Islamic Republic as a whole. So that the system has lost what had been an important relief valve where elections were able to present people the idea that they could bring about change through elections. That's pretty well gone. And so people don't see any particular reason to vote. Not that there's any organized opposition to the Islamic Republic which offers any prospect of bringing it down, but it just, people have gotten tired and people have lost faith in the existing political system.
Alam Saleh, if this parliament loses its moderates, it loses its reformists, what will it look like?
Well, it definitely will look like a complete control of the whole entire political system, including the upcoming presidential election by the Conservatives. And it also shows that and indicates that people are marginalized and are not considered as important in the future of the regime's political kind of discourses or dynamics in general. I think any low turnout would show that still the regime enjoys the support of a traditional segment of society. However, if it's lower than 30% or 40%, 35%, that shows that the regime actually loses even those supports from those traditional religious segment of society internally, and that would be a new phenomenon in the history of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Setareh Sadeqi, so if we take the timeline from November, you had people going out onto the streets. This was triggered by fuel prices, right? Protests over rising fuel prices. Many of them felt that the government wasn't listening to them. Tens of them, hundreds of them lost their lives. Many people were gunned down as well. And then you have the downing of the jet. And beyond the downing of the jet that included innocent people, including Iranian citizens, from what I had gathered and from a lot of what Iranians had said, it was the idea that for the first couple of days in the aftermath of it, people felt lied to by their government, and they felt that the government was trying to cover it up. If we take those things and put them together, would it be fair to use the word betrayal when people view their government, and that's why they're losing trust in the system?
Well, I don't think that's how people view it. I mean, there are, as I said, many grievances. There's dissatisfaction with how the government has acted, both in the case of protests and in the case of the downing of the passenger plane, which is still a question and as how this happened really, and investigation by international partners is going on. So we cannot have a certain word on that. But we also have to bear in mind the assassination of Qasem Soleimani by the US government while he was on a diplomatic mission in Iraq. And that's one thing that encourages people to support the establishment, no matter how many grievances they have with it. But on the other hand, they may see the election or withdrawing from taking part in the election as a means of showing that they are dissatisfied with how the government has acted. So it's a mixture of both encouragement and discouragement from taking part in the election. And we have to wait and see how Iranians are going to act, because it's very difficult to predict how Iranians will act according to what has happened to them. And for instance, on the 40th day after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, or just the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution, people displayed a massive turnout in support of the government.
Okay, so let's take.
And
let's
this
take what
does
you're
not
saying.
mean that they have forgotten about what has happened in November and other.
Okay, so fair. So Patrick Claussen. So a lot of the time when let me take what you said, Setareh, and pose it to Patrick. Right. A lot of the time when you point to the dissatisfaction and the crowds that are on the streets for economic reasons and otherwise, and we look at the slogans, especially against Ayatollah Khamenei and others, a lot of Iranians who support the government say, did you see the pictures from Qasem Soleimani's funeral? Did you see the pictures from the 40-day anniversary, from the anniversary of 41 years of the Islamic Republic and so on? What are you smoking? These people support the government. Do you buy that?
No, I think that Ayatollah Khamenei had it correct when he said that people should turn out to vote in these elections because they support Iran, not because they support me. And that's why people who come out to vote will come out to vote overwhelmingly. That's why people came to Soleimani's funeral, was that a sense of nationalism and a sense that the Iranian nation was under threat. And so the Islamic Republic, which came to power at first being very dismissive of nationalism, has now, in fact, relies on nationalism as one of the principal ways in which it gets Iranians who don't particularly like the Islamic Republic to come out to Qasem Soleimani's funeral or to come out to vote, is by saying that the Iranian nation is under threat. And that's been relatively effective at a time when the Islamic revolutionary ideology has lost its charm for people, and when a time when people think that no one in politics has any solution to the country's many economic problems, this reliance upon a nationalist appeal to saying that the country of Iran is under threat still holds a certain effectiveness in bringing people out.
So let's ask Alim. Alim, is that going to be enough to keep this government secure? The issues such as Qasem Soleimani's death, which sort of transcends people's economic grievances on the streets.
Well, Qasem Soleimani's assassination was a very different issue. It was actually done by an external enemy or the perceived enemy in a foreign source. He was considered as a national hero. He was a charismatic military man, a leader, who was again perceived as someone who had protected the Iranian territorial integrity and security. But when it comes to the parliamentary election, more often MPs are perceived generally as corrupt, as biased towards the political power, and not necessarily so popular amongst people themselves. So as a result, this are two issues. So those people who have gathered in Qasem Soleimani's funeral are not necessarily supporting the regime's internal political policies and their MPs in the parliament, who have shown actually have very little things to say when it comes to some strategic decision making or political decision making, which are often at the hand of those in deep states in Iran.
Patrick Clawson, how much credit should Donald Trump's maximum pressure be taking for the current situation in the build-up to these elections?
Well, they've left Iranian people without much hope that there's going to be anyone in the Iranian political system who has a way of improving economic circumstances, and that the chances that the current Iranian government will agree to the kinds of changes in policy that Trump would insist upon before relieving his maximum pressure are slight. And as a result, people have decided that the economic future is going to remain bleak, and that makes many people very despairing about their personal lives. So Trump's policies certainly contribute to that mood of despair, but what's not clear is, well, what alternative people will see. At the moment, the principal alternative is just to stay out of politics, stay home, don't do anything about voting.
Setareh Sadeqi, when we look at how Iranians view the United States, I wonder how prevalent is this idea that, well, we tried to negotiate with them, we tried the nuclear deal, they ripped it up, and they're imposing more sanctions, we cannot deal with them. Okay, we lost Setareh there. Hopefully we can get her back. Let me redirect that question for Alam. And I wonder, I mean, especially if we look at the hardliners being strengthened in this next parliament, no matter what, even if you're against the government, is there a deeper distrust of the United States, especially the Trump administration?
Well, actually, I think any American pressure would strengthen the hardliners' position inside Iran. The way that when George W. Bush when he called Iran as part of the axis of evil, that led to the hardliners and conservatives to marginalize reformists during Ahmadinejad for 8 years. This time, again, the so-called maximum pressures actually introduced by President Trump will definitely lead to the conservatives coming to power and gain the power, regain the power again, and marginalize reformists or any type of reform for another 8 years.
Right. Patrick, a weaker Rouhani, especially given that there's a year until the next presidential election, a weaker President Rouhani who falls under that reformist camp means what?
Well, that's what's happened to every other president in the Islamic Republic, is that their power has dramatically been diminished in their last 2 years in office. So it's hardly a surprise that that's also happening to Hassan Rouhani. The supreme leader has systematically undercut each and every president, including a president like Ahmadinejad, whose re-election he strongly supported. So I don't think anybody in Washington anticipated that Rouhani was going to be a particularly powerful figure in his last few years in office. And in any case, on the issues that the United States cares about, it does not appear that Rouhani is the decision maker by any means. So Rouhani's role seems to be quite small on the nuclear issue, on the question of support for terrorist groups abroad. And Washington has always been much more concerned about what will persuade the supreme leader to modify his policies.
So, Alam Saleh, is that a more crystallized focus on Khamenei, focusing on what he wants and how to deal with him and just bypassing the presidency?
Yes, definitely. I mean, by controlling parliament and the upcoming kind of presidential election, they will definitely be able to at least to justify their policies legally and internally by the support from the parliament. Right. Otherwise, the most important decision-making is in the hand of Supreme Leader.
Okay, so we've got 1 minute and 10 seconds left on the program. Setareh is back up. So Setareh, I want to give you the final word here. because we lost you for a few minutes. So wrap us up before I say goodbye. Setareh, go ahead.
Right. Well, I think we have to wait tomorrow and after the announcement of the election results to see how the Iranian nation is going to act. But also, I would like to stress again that we have to bear in mind that what we see from Tehran, Isfahan, and a few other major cities does not represent the entire Iran. And it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen. And I don't think Iranians are influenced by, or at least I would say that they are more encouraged or discouraged by how their government acts rather than by how their enemies responds to what's going on in Iran.
Okay, Setareh Sadeqi, Alam Saleh, and Patrick Clawson, good to have you all on the Newsmakers. Interesting getting your views. Thanks again for joining us. And we thank you for watching this episode of the Newsmakers. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.